Next question is: an application team has 3 environments for their application: development, pre-production, and production. The team recently adopted AWS code pipeline. However, the team has had several deployments of misconfigured or non-functional development code into the production environment, resulting in user disruption and downtime. The DevOps engineer must review the pipeline and add steps to identify problems with the application before it is deployed. What should the engineer do to identify functional issues during the deployment process? Choose 2. A. Use Amazon Inspector to add a test action to the pipeline. Use the Amazon Inspector Runtime Behavior Analysis Inspector Rules package to check that the deployed code complies with company security standards before deploying it to production. B. Using AWS Code Build to add a test action to the pipeline to replicate common user activities and ensure that the results are as expected before progressing to production deployment. C. Create an AWS Code Deploy action in the pipeline with a deployment configuration that automatically deploys the application code to a limited number of instances. The action then pauses the deployment so that the QA team can review the application functionality. When the review is complete, Code Deploy resumes and deploys the application to the remaining production Amazon EC2 instances. D. After the deployment process is complete, run a testing activity on an Amazon EC2 instance in a different region that accesses the application to simulate user behavior. If unexpected results occur, the testing activity sends a warning to an Amazon SNS topic. Subscribe to the topic to get updates. E. Add an AWS Code Deploy action in the pipeline to deploy the latest version of the development code to pre-production. Add a manual approval action in the pipeline so that the QA team can test and confirm the expected functionality. After the manual approval action, add a second code deploy action that deploys the approved code to the production environment. Correct answer is B and E. Next question is: a DevOps engineer is responsible for the deployment of a PHP application. The engineer is working in a hybrid deployment, with the application running on both on-premises servers and Amazon EC2 instances. The application needs access to a database containing highly confidential information. Application instances need access to database credentials, which must be encrypted at rest and in transit before reaching the instances. How should the engineer automate the deployment process while also meeting the security requirements? A. Use AWS Elastic Beanstalk with a PHP platform configuration to deploy application packages to the instances. Store database credentials on AWS Systems Manager parameter store using the secure string data type. Define an IAM role for Amazon EC2 allowing access, and decrypt only the database credentials. Associate this role to all the instances. B. Use AWS Code Deploy to deploy application packages to the instances. Store database credentials on AWS Systems Manager parameter store using the secure string data type. Define an IAM policy for allowing access, and decrypt only the database credentials. Attach the IAM policy to the role associated to the instance profile for Code Deploy managed instances, and to the role used for on-premises instances registration on Code Deploy. C. Use AWS Code Deploy to deploy application packages to the instances. Store database credentials on AWS Systems Manager parameter store using the secure string data type. Define an IAM role with an attached policy that allows decryption of the database credentials. Associate this role to all the instances and on-premises servers. Use AWS code deploy to deploy application packages to the instances. Store database credentials in the AppSpec file. Define an IAM policy for allowing access to only the database credentials. Attach the IAM policy to the role associated to the instance profile for Kodi deploy managed instances and the role used for on-premises instances registration on code deploy. Correct answer is B. Next question is: a company has a single developer writing code for an automated deployment pipeline. The developer is storing source code in an Amazon S3 bucket for each project. The company wants to add more developers to the team but is concerned about code conflicts and lost work. The company also wants to build a test environment to deploy newer versions of code for testing and allow developers to automatically deploy to both environments when code is changed in the repository. What is the most efficient way to meet these requirements? A. Create an AWS code commit repository for each project, use the master branch for production code, and create a testing branch for code deployed to testing. Use feature branches to develop new features and pull requests to merge code to testing and master branches. B. Create another S3 bucket for each project for testing code, and use an AWS Lambda function to promote code changes between testing and production buckets. Enable versioning on all buckets to prevent code conflicts. C. Create an AWS code commit repository for each project, and use the master branch for production and test code with different deployment pipelines for each environment. Use feature branches to develop new features. D. Enable versioning and branching on each S3 bucket, use the master branch for production code, and create a testing branch for code deployed to testing. Have developers use each branch for developing in each environment. Correct answer is A.